Taiwan has every right to be its own economy as it
Absolutely.
has developed, and I think we all need to support that and work with that, and try to stay away from, as I think we have, the U.S. Taiwan Relations Act of 1979-80 was deliberately ambiguous, very deliberately ambiguous,
Mhm.
and people try to reword that now in more definitive ways, and I don't think that's useful. I think Taiwan needs to be recognized for the economy it is, and within the region that it's in.
Welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Gist. Our guest this evening is Phil Midland. He's based in the US. He's the president of Strategic Renaissance 21, a think tank in the US. And his focus area is China, where we're all interested in. And of course, he's also studies India and the neighborhood. Phil Midland, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you.
My first question, in the context of the Trump victory in the US, how do you think the Chinese are looking at this? What's the kind of thinking going on there? We've had some indication they may be a little upset over his coming in and anticipating the worst. What's your sense?
Well, first of all, it's nice to meet you and greet your colleagues. Um, I would start with a continuity between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. And as you know, that goes uh, tangibly to the February 2020 visit of President Trump to Gujarat. I'm sure that is not lost in the mind of the overall Indian population.
Yeah.
That that this is not a new relationship, and also it was during that time that the Quad, the special association of India, Japan, Australia, and the U.S., was formed. So I think, in the sense of uh, people in strategic analysis in the U.S., and likely, I would hope, in India, and I would also add in Japan, there is a continuity, and not a new, what are we going to do?
Mhm.
So I think China sees it in that way, that there is the this form returning of a dialogue and of activity, which people call the Quad, but many don't really know what Quad is.
Yeah.
But it is an association that has very special historical and hopefully future significance, to add stability to the region, but also offer some new opportunities for trade and finance and other issues. So many of that has to be worked on. A lot of meat has to be put on that bone. But again, I would emphasize, within the Quad, my own personal view is Japan and India really is the core of the Quad, and what the U.S. and Australia do is hopefully add value,
Mhm.
and add external from the West relationships to the Quad to make it very special. So, from the Chinese perspective, I would say that they're going to watch that very closely. They do understand it as continuity. In the meantime, especially since February, March of 2022, when the unfortunate situation in Ukraine began in a kinetic way,
Yeah.
there is a drive, which you're well aware of, for Eurasian landmass, infrastructure and trade. This is not new. This goes back. couple hundred years to Mackinder and Mahan, whether
Yeah.
it's land or sea. And the reality is that the land route, the facilities, and the ability to form the infrastructure is there. We're in an era where these things can be done. So I think we have to take all of that in context, and China clearly does. So this brings up to the summit that was just completed in Kazan, the BRICS. And so for this level of the discussion, I would just leave with one thought from a person of the West. And I would also say in Japan that India is the I in BRICS. So it's with that reality and focus that we should really think together, how do we, US, India, Japan specifically, how do we employ that in a very stable way, not a threatening way, but a stable way, knowing that China with 1.5 billion people is just to your north, and that the landmass of Eurasia is that.
Mhm. When you say Japan and India are the Quad, US and
The core of
Australia,
the core of the Quad.
yeah, but why do you say that? I mean, you say they are the core of the Quad.
Because Japan and India are Asian countries. So this is my own feeling and analysis that there is a very special relationship between India and Japan. I think it's very positive, and not a lot of noise is made about it, but a lot of
Mhm.
practical things happen because of it. And I think for the Quad to be formed around that, which it has been, is only positive. But we need to proceed with the Quad now and put some meat on the bones, but in ways that will be understandable, not threatening to neighbors to your north.
It's also said that India is the weak link in the Quad, you know, one which can't make up its mind about whether to go full fledged with this Quad or, shore up elsewhere, have room for maneuver.
Well, again, I wouldn't say weak link at all. Um, we're in a new age of the digital age, and India with 1.4, 1.5 billion people, you have to think in terms of data. You are, and China are the two largest reservoirs of data in the world.
Yeah,
Okay. So, what Prime Minister Modi did some 10 years ago by launching and enabling Digital Life India, again, I've watched that for years. I highly regard it. I'm not sure the rest of the world is aware of it that much, but as you would well know, that has enabled the whole population of India in an incredible accelerated way. So you are a reservoir of data, and data is now on the balance sheet, so to
yeah.
speak. Uh, and China has the same sort of approach and been digitally enabled as well. So when we think in terms of Quad and what India brings to the table, uh, we have to look at it in a very, very new way.
And India is hosting a Quad summit next year. I guess President Trump will come. I guess it's
I
a
would
leader.
be surprised if he didn't. He's very
Yeah,
comfortable in his relationship with Prime Minister Modi. In fact,
so get
as you know, Prime
yeah,
Minister Modi was one of the first people yesterday to congratulate him.
true, true. So to get back to China and how they are looking at Trump, what's your sense of where this is going?
Well, in your and my exchange of a few notes before this call and interview, you used the word game.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, and this gets to Elon Musk and other aspects of the employment of digital technologies. But gaming is now a new capability. It's nothing. It's not just fun, but in the Chinese sense, gaming is not only strategic from Sun Tzu and others
Yeah.
centuries, millennial ago, but gaming and their employment of digital technologies is throughout the population. So I think one can safely assume that they are uh, in their mind, in their way of life, they're gaming this situation out. But that's not a negative, um, because we together are playing a game. It's a very serious game,
Yeah.
but we have to understand it in the way our kids are all brought up now of gaming.
Yeah.
I heard an interview the other day between Elon Musk and another individual on a podcast here in the US. And the whole front end of that interview is about gaming and how the top surgeons of the world are the best gamers. So if you take that analogy, because it requires focus, I would say that the Chinese uh, they're not going to be worried, but they may need to adjust the game. And we have to, whether it's Quad or U.S. India, India Japan, we all have to get ourselves ready for a very sophisticated new type of strategic gaming, but strategic not in a negative sense, in a positive development sense. And so this is where I would envision the new coming administration to understand the multiple factors the world has right now, and look regionally and sub-regionally. Northeast Asia has very special challenges right now because of, for instance, the North Korea Russia new relationship. Then Southeast Asia, which has ASEAN has been incredibly successful.
Yeah.
Uh, and now South Asia as well. You've gone a long way from the non-aligned movement to a real actor, protector, enabler of not just the Indian Ocean region, but of Africa as well. And I hope we can go on to that a bit. And so we have to look at it, and I know the new U.S. administration will absolutely do this. Is engage semi and sub regionally and in cooperation. This is where the Quad comes in very powerfully. And I don't think the Chinese will uh, fall back from that. I don't think they will aggressively go after that, but they will factor it in. And so this will be a move counter move situation. And I think we have the ability, all of us do now, because we're digitally enabled, to to play that game. And I think play it well, and we'll have stability.
You think this agreement between India and China on disengagement on the line of actual control and gradual de-escalation, the Chinese have been kind of wishy-washy about it for some time. They finally went ahead as far as Demchok and Depsang is concerned. You think it was driven by some of those concerns about how the American thing could shape out?
Well, again, first of all, you have a very, in my opinion, understandable and long-term relationship with Russia.
Yeah,
You also have a special relationship with Iran, a growing relationship with the Arabian Middle East,
yeah,
specifically Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And so you have to put all of those chips on the table and factors in. And how does India play that? Well, in a stabilizing way. And the reality is that this land route, the Mackinder concept, it's happening before our eyes. It is
Mm.
forming. We
Yeah.
can't deny that. Okay. For instance, what the Chinese are doing in Afghanistan, development wise,
Yeah.
uh, I think it's quite surprising that it hasn't been noted more in the press. Okay. The face of Central Asia is changing,
Yeah.
and that is going to be the connector of the land routes. So, India, these land routes are going to change the game, adjust the game at least for India, because the sea routes are adjusting as well. The Suez is
Yeah.
challenged. The Arctic routes are now open. Malacca has always been an issue. And so India, I would say, in its own interests, is going to have to look wider, and I'm sure you are. Okay. Now, but in that sense, this is again where the Quad comes in, especially what I call the core of Quad, and that is India, Japan. Um, you're going to have to know yourselves and how you play the game,
Yeah.
and how can the U.S. and Japan in specific, how can we really work with and trust India to be the eye in the bricks in the
Mm.
interests of us all? And I think these are all things that we should be discussing openly
Mm.
and in a positive way, but knowing that our core, and I think we should be striving for our core to in fact be the Quad, because that is where West meets East
Yeah.
in a stable way. One other issue I would just add, um, and I when I met Nitin in Delhi recently, is Africa. India can play an incredible role in Africa simply by the diaspora and that is there. And so we need to think together ways. So we need to look at the Quad much more than some sort of format for military exercises, because it needs to be much more than that.
You used the word trust a little while back in the context of India. Is How is India actually viewed, say, from Washington? From I mean, is it trusted, or is it seen as somebody who's
Again, I'm giving my own personal opinion and
yeah,
observation, and I am not an India expert by any means.
yeah,
But, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but you are a true republic. Okay. And I'm not sure that's well understood deeply in the US,
mm,
the state by state nature that you manage, and manage very well. And through entities like, for instance, the RSS, these systematic approaches of your nation are not well understood. Now,
mm,
on the one hand, that's not our business, but on the other hand, it does take some at least attempt to understand it so we can communicate well. And so I myself, I approach it from a what's called system approach. The system of China is the Communist Party of China.
mm,
That is the system. We're not talking ideology.
yeah,
The system of India is, from my perspective, the RSS. Again, not an ideology. It is a system. And the U.S., I would say, especially now, will accelerate in a advancement of a system of governance, because the U.S. itself is an experiment. It's a 250-year-old experiment.
yeah,
Uh, we will now be advancing in an adjusted system of technological and efficient governance. So let's call it a system as well. And if we all look at it from that approach, I think we'll come to a understanding of that, and I use the word synchronization, that a synchronization of our systems is very possible.
mm,
And, and I use the analogy of that, and I think most people get it right away when I say it this way. If you take Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, those are two systems.
yeah, mm.
and neither one compromised, but they did synchronize.
Yeah, yeah,
So we have what we have, which is for the betterment of everybody. They didn't go to battle; they synchronized.
yeah.
So I think if we can find the way to do that, and I'm personally I'm optimistic we can, but we have to understand the new technology, the new means that our social structures have to communicate and form and engage, and but that the systems of our various cultures and nations are what they are, and we need to respect and understand that.
I'd like to come to Donald Trump. What does he want of China?
I would say that this is absolutely not a regime change issue at all.
Yeah,
Uh, I in the 4 years previous, the because of the nature of doing the deal, the transaction, shall we call it transactional, these are hard bargains. And I would say the skill set of many of the key people from that time in that previous administration were engaged in very, very hard negotiation and bargaining with the Chinese. And it did not complete.
yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's going to pick up where it left off either. But I do think there is a set of people that are very skilled from that time in the means of negotiation and how do you negotiate in two different systems. I think we'll see a return of many of those people and back at it. Uh, but but not in a that doesn't mean just pick up where we left off because
Yeah.
things have changed. So, but it's not going to be a necessarily. It's not going to be a standoff because somehow we have to figure out, can we find a way to cooperate and compete? Can we find that? And so I think very capable people will re-engage on that issue.
But China is America's number one strategic rival. That's cast in stone.
I'm not. I don't view it quite that way. Again, I go back to the systems approach.
Mhm.
Uh, that is a rival system because it's a different system. It is a globally uh, has it's a system with global reach, both through centuries of diaspora movement and within the last 40 years, development and investment. So it is a system with global reach. Of course, the U.S. is a system with global reach. I would say India is also a system with global reach. And so it is, but it's not necessary to go to battle over that.
Yeah.
So I don't think the solutions are born in the 20th century. I think the solutions are based in the current technology and the digital engagement, the tools of digital engagement that we have.
How do you think Southeast Asia is reacting to Trump? The Philippines, countries that have been under pressure from the Chinese. What kind of arrangement do you see shaping up? A stronger American commitment to these countries? How do you see this?
Well, I would use three key points from the last administration. One, if you remember in 2017, officially no one would talk to Duterte,
Yeah,
but Trump reached out and talked to him. Okay. And then we had the rather incredible summit with Kim Jong un.
yeah,
Where were they held? Singapore and Hanoi.
yeah,
So I don't think for a moment that Southeast Asia is an afterthought. It's a very tuned and continuing to improve system that really is not threatening outside of it. And but there are issues there. For instance, Vietnam. I mean, it's incredible what's happened in Vietnam. I first went to Vietnam myself in a different context in 1972, so you can imagine what I saw in 1972.
Yeah.
But what we have to understand is their system is the Communist Party of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay, and many in the West tend to put that aside because the business is good, but we're going to have to respect that system and how it operates. So, and that's in the belly of ASEAN and Southeast Asia. So we have to work with them and figure that out. But there's no reason at all that the current administration can't talk to the Marcos
Yeah.
administration,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I'm sure that will happen. And I am sure our relationships will continue to move forward. Same with Indonesia. Indonesia has some of its own interests clearly, and the new president is working on that, including with China. And but we're going and India also has a very special cultural and historic relationship with Indonesia that I know you're very mindful of. But we
Yeah.
have to work through all of those things and attend to them. That these are not just quick transactional and political solutions.
And how do you see the Taiwan scenario playing out?
Um, I I think we have to be, Taiwan has every right to be its own economy as it
Absolutely.
has developed, and I think we all need to support that and work with that, and try to stay away from, as I think we have, the U.S. Taiwan Relations Act of 1979-80 was deliberately ambiguous, very deliberately ambiguous.
Mhm.
And people try to reword that now in more definitive ways, and I don't think that's useful. I think Taiwan needs to be recognized for the economy it is, and within the region that it's in. I think what went on during the period of 2008 with President Ma Ying-jeou was incredibly positive,
Mhm.
and and we need to find a way to restabilize that. And I would just add that's going to take more work from Japan and Southeast Asia to be more active. It can't just be the U.S.
Are you saying that Taiwan's push for political recognition, international political recognition as an independent state, that's something which should be discouraged?
I think using the term independent state is unnecessary.
Okay.
A recognized economy, absolutely. But I don't think we need to use terms that draw lines, because it
Hmm.
is a functioning economy and a trading economy and trading with the mainland of China, as you know.
Yeah.
And it's so I think people that take such a short-term view and want to make lines and specific issues out of it, it's not the way the world overall is going. First of all,
Yeah.
because you could have these discussions in many areas, like in Africa, for instance, uh, and we should not encourage that.
So you'd be okay with some kind of a situation where China's demands of sovereignty or whatever over Taiwan are somehow satisfied.
I I would say that we should leave it ambiguous
Okay.
and let the in that time frame of ambiguity, which is now 45 years old. Uh, Taiwan has developed a democracy for its the
Mm.
governance of its system and economy, and it's found a way, uh, especially from 2008 timeframe, to interact with the mainland in a very positive way. And I don't think that any of us from the outside should do anything to disturb that or encourage disturbance of that. So I do feel, though, it should be recognized that Japan has a historical interest
Yeah.
in Taiwan, and they should find ways to be more active and involved.
So, last question. There are a lot of doomsday scenarios, about a possible war involving Taiwan. What's your take?
I I just don't see it going kinetic at all. Uh, and again, I think, of course, one always has to be prepared for worst case solutions. You have to be prepared for that with Pakistan. You have to be prepared for that with China, for instance, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
But one should not. I think, for instance, what Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping did in Kazan, sitting down, uh, and what Mr. Jaikan Shur and Mr. Deval did in preparation for that,
Yeah.
uh, I find quite positive. You found a way to bring the temperature down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not settled, okay,
Yeah. True.
but you brought the temperature down.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you, I've been to Tibet 9 times over a period of 30 years, and the infrastructure is incredible development.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm sure you're well aware of that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And throughout China, the infrastructure development is incredible. You can't fault them for that,
Yeah.
okay? But there is a reality, and I think the best you can do to stabilize it and not have Ladakh be an issue that can ignite something, the better. So I think what the two leaders have done is quite positive. And now focus on things like responsible trade and
Yeah.
responsible investment, and what can India and China do possibly in third areas, like in Africa, for instance.
Yeah.
So what could you do an experiment in some form of relationship, but in a third place?
Yeah. In
These are
fact, I
things that
think,
the U.S. has to think about as well. So.
yeah. In fact, India and China do have some understanding on Africa, but I don't think it's proceeded very far. I think somewhere the bilateral relationship has gone down, so everything else went down with it.
Well, okay, but that's really the intensity of the last couple of years has distracted that. But it doesn't mean you couldn't find some viable project or development that is of the interest of both China and India in Africa and the interests of some African country. You know, small is fine, but find something that you can do together in a third place, and you'll end up learning a lot about each other.
On that note, Phil Midland, great talking to you. You have a very middle of the road and a very common sense approach. And I think we should revisit this conversation sometime later on. I think we'll have some good ideas from you.
It was
Thank
a
you very
pleasure
much.
and
Great
honor to
talking to
meet
you.
you, and I hope to meet you again and in person next time I'm in Delhi.
Lovely, lovely. Looking forward. Looking forward.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful evening, because I know
Thank
the
you. Lovely
sun is
talking.
down there. It's going to come up here soon. So
Yeah. Thank you. Lovely talking to you.
take care. Bye bye. Thank you.
That's all we have for you on this edition of The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good evening.